One thing that is often left out and not discussed enough and causes confusion with many builders is the grounding system. I use a ground bus and I put it right here, and this ground bus serves all the preamp side and input side of the signal, and the power amp side has its own ground over here on the chassis bolt side. This ground will connect onto one speaker jack, and this way you have one ground point for the preamp for the whole amplifier circuit, like so. Think of the ground like a river. This ground bus is a river, and the ground lines, leads that go to it, are like tributaries. So the tributaries meet the river and they follow it and empty into one point, the sea, which is, or the ocean, which is this first jack. There are other ways to ground, but this is a simple way that is very effective at reducing noise. The ground bus can also be grounded to a point inside the chassis. Let's say here, for example, in the case where you may be using plastic jacks. Can you see inside there? Right here. So grounding and making good solder joints, wrapping your components carefully and properly, is key to producing a successful amplifier build. The grounding scheme is essential to proper operation of the amplifier, and a good grounding scheme will produce the least amount of noise. It's important to ground the preamp and inputs on the same side, on the input side of the chassis. When this is installed in the chassis, that ground bus will go right there at the jack, and the jack is going to provide the ground for this amplifier. You could also ground the side of the chassis, but this is also a good way. The whole assembly will fit inside the chassis like so. We'll remove the template and install the volume and switch and the jacks inside the chassis. The template simply serves as a method of being able to do all the work outside the chassis and then assemble the whole system at once it's completed. We've got one more wire to do from here to here, but for now this is to show you how I do it. There are many ways to do things, of course, and mine is not the only way, but it's a good way. Your preamp ground begins at the third filter cap and runs down, picks up the ground from the volume pot here, goes down and down, picks up the ground on your cathode resistor. Ground is picked up here, and the whole assembly is grounded. This is a bit of overkill on the 5F1 as far as a grounding scheme, but on more complicated amplifiers it's very important to follow this grounding scheme, and it'll pick up another cathode ground along this route on the 5E3, for example, and more pots along here. So this shows you a simple version of how to do it on more complicated amplifiers, and it's good practice to begin with the 5F1 and then move on from there if you plan to build other amplifiers. The 5F1 is a very nice amplifier in its own right, so they're fun to build and nice to have around for practice amplifiers or recording. So get yourself one. If you're having any difficulties with your kit, don't hesitate to give me a call or send me an email and I'll be glad to help you out. Personal service is part of my product at Boot Hill Amps.